The Spark of the New Age. Chapter 1. The Arrival. The dawn mist clings low upon the valley as you approach the great stone hold of Lord Edron. Your horse, weary from the long passage, picks its way across uneven cobbles slick with dew. The castle looms above like a slumbering beast, its towers dark against the pale sky. Beneath your cloak lies a bundle of iron and copper, sealed jars of brine, and scrolls etched with diagrams few here could read. The villagers had watched you pass with wary eyes. Some crossed themselves, others merely muttered. The sight of your strange baggage, a woven basket of glinting coils, glass vessels, and treated parchment, was enough to raise whispers. In the fields, one boy called after you, voice cracking, witchfire, yet you pressed onward. You are no conjurer, but neither are you a simple craftsman. You carry a kind of fire, yes, but a fire that flows through metal, not wood. You have seen the power in controlled sparks, the pull of iron to lodestone, the curling of leaf-thin gold at the touch of current. You believe this knowledge could transform a lord's domain, should he dare the future. At the gatehouse your name and purpose are taken. A letter of seal from a southern scholar grants you entrance, but no warmth. Within, the castle is stone and silence. It will be up to you to stir its heart. Chapter 2. The Lord and the Pitch. You stand in Lord Edran's solar, light from the hearth flickering on the thick tapestries that veil the cold stone walls. He is a man of stern angles and narrow patience, and as you unroll your drawings, sketches of copper coils, vessels of fluid, a ringing bell strung with wires, his expression does not change. This, my lord, you begin carefully, is not witchcraft. It is drawn from nature. A force invisible yet real, like wind unseen yet felt, or warmth that rises from coals. You present the simplest device, a jar sealed with wax, 2 metal tongues within, submerged in brined vinegar. You place a thin wire between them and gently touch it to a shred of gold leaf. It curls just slightly. The movement is small but undeniable. He leans closer. And what use is this twitching metal? If you grant me a space to work, and tools, glass, copper, laborers, I can show you more. A wire that carries a bell's chime across the length of your keep, a means of sending signals between towers. In time, perhaps even light itself. He regards you in silence, then glances at his steward. A breath passes. You may have the shed by the west stables, he says at last. Fail, and you'll leave with nothing but soot on your hands. Chapter 3. The Workshop Awakens. The shed is a ruin of broken planks and old straw, but it is dry. You clear the rot, sweep the dirt, and begin. Diagrams are hung on wooden beams, tools laid out on cloth. At your request, the Lord assigns a pair of apprentices and a blacksmith named Torrin, whose hands are broad and whose questions are few. You begin with the batteries, voltaic cells, as they would one day be known, clay jars lined with wax, vinegar boiled with salt, iron rods shaped by Torrin, and copper plates hammered flat from scrap. It's like stacking wells, you explain to the apprentices. Each jar holds a bit. Stack more, and the flow strengthens. Together, you construct 10, then 20. Wires of twisted copper connect them. The current hums soft as a whisper. Copper wire becomes your bottleneck. Thick rods conduct well, but they are too stiff, too costly. You and Torrin discuss for hours, and finally settle on a method. Heated copper rods drawn through graduated holes in an iron plate, then spun around grooved wooden cylinders turned by treadle. A makeshift draw plate, driven by foot, aided by grease and patience. The wire grows thinner, more flexible, a marvel in itself. Chapter 4. The Talking Wire. With wire enough for 30 yards, you and the apprentices erect 2 tall posts across the outer yard. Between them runs your copper thread, strung tight with tension stones and small counterweights. At one end, you fasten a brass bell with a hinged striker. At the other, the battery array and a crude switch made of carved oak and tin. The test is ready. Lord Edron comes at dusk, drawn not by promise but by the growing rumors. The apprentices stand back as you demonstrate. You close the switch. The bell chimes. Simple, clean, audible even across the courtyard. You disconnect the wires. Then you reconnect them with a slight change. A series of rings and gaps carved in bone rotating on a wheel. A crude encoding system. Not letters yet, but patterns. One short chime, one long. A signal system, you explain. One bell answers another. No rider, no torch, no delay. The Lord is silent for a time. Then, can you build one between my keep and the watchtower in the hills? Yes, my lord. And you will. Chapter 5. Pulp and Ink. But signal is not enough. You speak of knowledge carried not just by wire, but on page, of orders and records, copied not by monks but by machines. Lord Edron listens. He does not yet believe, but he listens. You turn to another challenge, paper. There is parchment, but it is dear. For mass writing, you need pulp. You find rags, old linen, cast-off wool. With Torren's help, a vat is built. Wooden hammers lifted by a rotating shaft powered by treadle or mule fall upon soaked cloth. Days of pounding reduce it to a slurry. A fine mesh mold, fashioned from stretched wire and set in a wooden frame, captures the pulp. Pressed, dried, it becomes sheets. Rough, but usable. Ink is soot, vinegar and gum. You refine it by trial and failure. Charcoal ink runs. Gall ink burns the page. A mixture using iron filings proves best. Dark, permanent, legible. You teach the boys to write, to press pulp, to cut quills. Within weeks the workshop smells of vinegar and ash, the walls lined with uneven but growing stacks of handmade paper. Chapter 6. The Press and the Promise. The press is last. You begin with wood. A heavy frame, much like a wine press. The plate is carved from seasoned oak, the letters from soft lead. You melt scraps from the Lord's old coin molds, cast them into small rectangular dies. One by one, letters are fitted into a tray. The platen descends evenly with the aid of a screw shaft, scavenged from an old mill. Ink is spread with rounded pads of woolskin. The first try blurs. The second is too faint. The third prints a word, light. The fourth prints a message, to the tower prepare. The Lord visits unannounced. He sees the message printed clearly on rough paper. He reads it once, then again. Then, without a word, he calls his steward. You will build him a larger hall. You lower your head in thanks. The wire hums faintly overhead. And below, in a shed filled with steam, ink, and strange tools, the world begins to change. The work took 12 days. Each hour challenged the logic of your diagrams and the strength of your crew. You measured distances with twine and stride, studied tree growth for anchor points, and balanced the copper line across timber scaffolds built by hands that once only knew plow and forge. They learn quickly. They must. The blacksmith Torren fashioned iron sheaths to protect the wire at vulnerable crossings. You devised a system of tautness using weighted beams suspended from counter ropes. It is not elegant, but it holds. More importantly, it transmits. Your bell system, simple and repeatable, rings clearly from keep to tower and back again. One short, one long, two short. Then a new pattern, 3 evenly spaced taps. A code for riders to ready. Lord Edron watches the test in full court. His steward stands in awe, murmuring to a notary who now takes down messages on pressed paper. You catch the Lord's gaze once and he gives you a nod, not of kindness, but recognition. You have delivered. Now others notice. A rider from the abbey arrives under pretense of tribute, but his eyes linger on the wires. He asks pointed questions about the bells, about the ink, about the paper. You answer with measured calm, avoiding words like electric or current. You speak of metal's spirit, of clever fire, of echo carried in the line. The priest, traveling with him, frowns but says nothing. Later, in the workshop, you find one of your copper coils bent, examined roughly, then replaced. The apprentices swear they saw nothing. You instruct them to watch more closely. Your machines are not secrets, but they are not yet safe. Not from fear, not from envy, and not from those who see in them the erosion of control. Still you continue. The next wire stretches southward. The next bell waits. The network grows. Chapter 8. Light in the Abbey. When the letter arrives, its seal is waxed red with the abbey's crest. 2 keys, 1 iron, 1 bone. The words are penned with elegant menace, a request for demonstration, a summons cloaked in courtesy. Lord Edron does not trust it, neither do you, but refusal carries risk. You travel with a cart bearing your smallest cell, 2 linked batteries, a coiled wire, a bell apparatus and a small press sample. Your apprentices follow behind with trays of printed sheets. The word carried not by voice but by hand. The steward quips. You do not smile. The abbey is colder than the keep, though the candles are many. You set up in the scriptorium, under watchful eyes of monks whose hands are stained with ink and suspicion. They murmur in Latin. One young monk crosses himself when the bell rings without touch. You speak humbly, comparing your machines to aqueducts flowing power rather than water. You demonstrate how your ink binds to page without smearing, how your press copies in minutes what might take them hours. You offer a scroll, Psalms for the traveler. They study it closely. The abbot, an aging man with dark eyes, regards you silently. You do not claim these gifts come from God. I claim they come from understanding, which he permits. There is silence. Then, you may continue your work. But copies of all texts made shall be sent to this house. The church must read what the people will read. You nod. And quietly, the network grows. Chapter 9. A New Flame. It begins with a wheel. You sketch it on a cloudy morning. Copper wire wrapped around a wooden frame, with a central shaft fixed to paddles. You spin it and show the boys how a needle on a wire's end moves. Then you connect it to a bell. The harder they spin, the louder it rings. What makes it sing, one asks. You smile. Motion turned into current. They understand motion. They have turned millstones, pedaled lathes. You show them a modified water wheel, small at first, placed in the mill stream behind the smithy. Around the wheel's axle, you wind copper wire. In the center, a piece of lodestone fixed to turn within. The dynamo sings its first spark. Tiny, but there. No battery needed, just motion and stone. Torin is the first to grasp its strength. We can run wire into the hall, into the town. You nod. Into the night, you whisper. Chapter 10. The Light of Men. The bulb is different now, its filament thinner, its casing clearer. You place it in a copper cradle inside Lord Edron's solar. Wires run from the dynamo at the stream, strung carefully between beams and understone. The apprentices hold their breath. You signal, and the bulb glows. Not weak, not dim. A steady golden light. The courtiers gasp. One kneels. Lord Edron stands, arms crossed. He does not kneel. Soon, you say, we may fill the halls with it, the roads, the workshops. He only nods, eyes never leaving the light. That night, the courtyard is lit by 2 more bulbs, not torches, not fire, but captured motion made flame. The people begin to speak of it, not as witchery, but as the new flame. You draft the first map of the wire network, colored lines showing signal reach, lighted halls, presses active. You name it, the branch. Each bell post becomes a node, each press a route. The Lord orders messengers trained in your codes. He tasks you with drafting a primer. The church still watches, but even their scribes now request ink. Their letters carry new neatness. Then comes the envoy from the eastern marches, a noble's cousin bearing gifts. But his men linger too long in the workshop. One coil vanishes. You double your guards, teach the apprentices locks. There are rumors of others trying to copy your work. Crude attempts, dangerous ones. You know what must come next, the rule of measure, the teachings written down, the machines made safer, simpler. A new age turns on a wheel. You set your hand to it. Chapter 12, The Breath of Motion. The morning is silver and still when you climb the ridge above the forge, your boots damp with dew. Below, the creek runs strong, fed by rains from the eastern hills. You kneel beside the water's edge, tracing in the mud with a stick. A blade curved like a feather. Then another. Then a central shaft. The apprentices crowd behind you, uncertain. A wheel, one asks. More, you reply. A breath. A turning wind beneath our hands. Your next invention is not a thing of light, but of movement. You intend to create the first electric rotor, rudimentary perhaps, but enough to turn tools without muscle or fire, enough to shape metal with steadiness, enough to mill grain even, with no ox behind it. You begin with wood and iron. The wheel you design has 6 broad blades, hewn from ash and shaped by Toran with the patience of a carpenter priest. The shaft is fitted into a cradle of oiled stone and turned by hand until it spins freely. Around its base you fit a crown of copper windings, and at its heart a polished magnet fixed to a turning collar. It takes days of balance and correction. The wood swells, the iron grinds. You learn to shave the shaft thinner. You dip the bearings in sheep's fat and beeswax. But at last, when water is diverted down a carved flume and strikes the blades, the rotor spins. A low hum builds. The bell at the end of the circuit rings once, sharp and clear. Then again. Toran grips the frame, eyes wide. It runs itself. It runs with nature, you say. And with knowledge, within a week, the rotor is powering a turning lathe. A simple wheel connected to the axle now sands handles, rounds dowels, shaves bone. The apprentices no longer blister their hands on foot treadles. A dozen new tools become possible. It is not yet a revolution, but it is a breath, the first stir of something far larger. You must define, you must guard knowledge not through secrecy, but through clarity. You establish what you call the house of measure. It begins as a small room above the forge. There, on thick paper, you begin to write the rules, how to wind copper, how to shape a core, how to find the strength of a magnet. You create your own markings for current, for resistance, for motion. You define them not with symbols of the old world, but with simple tools, a candle's width, a day's turn, a bell's pitch. The apprentices become scribes. They draw diagrams. They test measurements. You create tables of weight and size. Wooden rods marked with iron nails become the first standards of length. A basin and counterweights measure flow. Time, once tracked only by sundial or bell, is now divided in terms of current pulses, each flash from a copper bulb its own tick. Lord Edron visits the room once and finds rows of children copying your tables. He asks, "Will they build like you?" "They will build better," you answer, "because they will not guess." The house of measure grows. Soon, visitors from other towns come not just to see the wires, but to learn. A quiet revolution takes root, not of flame or spark, but of mind. Chapter 14. The Loom of Words. With light and signal, you now turn to something deeper, knowledge shared, not simply stored. The printing press has grown faster. You and Toran built a second, then a third. Metal type has replaced lead, stronger, cleaner, reusable. A woman from the Western Forest, a former scribe named Malin, joins your crew. Her hands set type faster than you thought possible. Her eye sees misaligned letters from across the room. Together, you publish the first formal codex, the Book of Flame and Flow. Part guide, part story, it explains the new machines in plain speech. Not magic, not miracle. Practice. You print 100 copies. Lord Edron orders 10 for his court, 20 for his guards. The rest, you send with riders to nearby towns, abbeys and halls. Some will be burned, you know. Others will vanish, but a few will survive. 1 week later, a reply comes, written in your own printed script from a steward in the northern barony. "We saw the bell, we saw the light, we await your messenger." You smile. The loom of words has begun. You lean over Toran's shoulder, both of you focused on the small copper disc spinning within its frame. Above it, a narrow arm swings with each cycle, ticking against a notched ring. "Slower," you murmur. Toran adjusts the weight, an iron nut wound onto a string. The disc spins again, the arm clicks. The first electric clock. Time in this land has always been irregular, governed by bell towers, sunlight, and seasons. Monks measure vigils in prayers. Farmers judge the day by shadow and stomach. But now, with this wheel and coil, you have begun dividing the day by pulses, steady, predictable, mechanical. "It does not lie," Toran says, watching the hand swing. "No," you say softly, "and it will not forget." The two of you spend days refining it. The coil, drawn tighter, hums with precision. The escapement, a complex gearwork of polished bone and wire, releases energy in exact increments. A small bell rings every turn, 1 ring per minute, 60 to the hour. Lord Edron visits the workshop and stands quietly as the mechanism ticks beside him. He says nothing, but that evening he orders all castle bells to be synchronized with the new device. A week later, a tower bell chimes across the hills at the exact moment the castle bell tolls. The realm begins to breathe in rhythm. Chapter 16. Iron and Fire. Toran has become your closest confidant. Where once he forged horseshoes and barrel hoops, he now draws wire, casts frames, shapes gears to tolerances no smith had ever needed before. His forge glows with a new purpose. Together, you begin a new venture, a motor that can turn itself. You explain the principles in chalk across a board of slate, that copper coiled tightly around an iron core becomes a magnet when current flows through it. But a rotor made of such coils, when fed from a cell or dynamo, will spin. It is slow work. Copper wire must be wound tightly and insulated with wax-dipped linen. The frame must be strong enough to hold the armature but delicate enough to allow rotation. Torin devises a bearing from polished river stones set in oil. On the 12th day, it turns. First a shudder, then a spin, then a rhythm, whirring, unbroken, drawing power from a single battery cell. You both stand in silence. The sound is unlike anything this land has heard. Not hammer, not bell, but motion without hand. "We could drive mills," Torin whispers. "We will," you reply. "Mills, looms, carts one day." But the sound carries, and with it, fear. Chapter 17. Shadows over the border. The rumors come first in whispers. A rider from the southern roads tells of a priest in black robes calling your machines blasphemy, of sermons preached against false fire and the arrogance of man, of pilgrims instructed to shun Edron's hall. Then a letter arrives. It bears no seal, only a ribbon of ash-grey linen. The words are careful, elegant and cold. Knowledge not born of Scripture is temptation. Temptation leads to ruin. The bells you ring echo beyond the mountains. Beware. You show the letter to Lord Edron. He reads it twice, then burns it. Let them come. We are not afraid of monks with dry ink. But you are. Not of them, but of the people. Fear is quicker than fact. A child cries at the sight of a spinning coil. A baker in the lower town refuses to accept printed coin notes, calling them cursed. You begin to teach more openly, to show each piece, to let hands touch the devices. Torin brings the blacksmiths from the outlying villages and shows them how to wind copper. You give them tools, books, diagrams, not secrecy, strength. Still, you post guards at night and carry a blade. Chapter 18. The Heart of the Mountain. Your next ambition takes you deep. Below the keep, the old quarry lies abandoned. Veins of iron and copper still lace the walls, but the labor was deemed too costly years ago. You request it from the Lord, not for ore, but for water. The stream that once fed the castle cistern still runs beneath the stone. You divert it carefully through a sluice of carved timbers. Then you build your largest dynamo yet, 3 wheels in series, iron cores surrounded by tightly woven copper coils, all turning from the current. When the final wire is fixed and the water flows through, the workshop lights before the switch is even thrown. Every bulb glows, the press runs, the lathe spins. A fan turns above your bench, cooling your sweat. The castle becomes the first structure in the land fully lit and powered without fire or beast. You name it, the heart. The apprentices call it the mountain flame. Torin just calls it beautiful. Chapter 19. Ash and Judgment. They came with the dawn, black robes against the mist, crosses of iron bound in leather slung at their hips. A dozen riders bearing no banners, but every step of their arrival made it clear. They carried the authority of fear. The Inquisitors had crossed the southern border. You watch from the high wall as their horses clatter into the courtyard. The air still hums faintly from the dynamos below, the wire overhead like a silent string waiting to be plucked. Lord Edron meets them with formality. You stay behind, waiting for the summons you know will come. It does. You are brought before a cloaked figure whose voice is low and smooth as oiled parchment. He asks no questions at first, only walks through the workshop with gloved hands tucked inside his sleeves. He stops before a lamp. This, he says, is not natural. You choose your words with care. It is drawn from the earth and from water. It burns no wood. But it burns no wood. And yet you say it is not fire. He turns to Lord Edron. These machines breed pride. Pride births defiance. Edron does not flinch. They also bring order, bread, warmth. The Inquisitor gestures, and his men begin pulling equipment from shelves. The bell system, the clock, even a printed codex. All this must be taken to the Abbey, he declares, for judgment. But he underestimates you. Torren and the apprentices had prepared. As the Inquisitors sleep, you activate the outer lines. Bells ring in the tower. Messengers ride with full saddlebags toward allied towns. You send knowledge ahead like sparks on the wind. You cannot save the workshop, but you can save the fire. For 3 nights, the castle stands cold and silent. You remain confined, not in chains, but watched. Torren is lashed for refusing to give names. 2 apprentices are taken away in silence. 1 returns. He does not speak, but the people do. Quietly at first, then with courage. Farmers who used electric light in their barns. Masons who saw their sons learn to read from your printed words. Blacksmiths who built lathes from your drawings. They begin to speak for you. Lord Edron convenes his court and demands a formal hearing. The Inquisitor refuses. The people gather. The castle square fills, not with torches and pitchforks, but with paper. Sheets from your books, held aloft. The Inquisitor turns to leave. Edron blocks his path. Your judgment has passed, the Lord says. Let the people choose their light, and they do. Chapter 21, Flame Without End. In the months that follow, the heart is reopened. The dynamo runs again. Your machines are restored, not as secrets, but as tools of the realm. The House of Measure becomes a school. New presses are built, not just 1, but 5. They print guides, maps, letters, and prayers. A new tower rises beside the keep. At its top, a bell rings every hour by pulse of the electric clock. At night, its beacon shines across the hills, steady, golden, without smoke. Torren still works the forge, now with his sons. The apprentices teach others. 100 know what once only 10 did. You no longer hide. You no longer lead alone. One morning, the boy who once cried witchfire watches the bulb above your bench flicker to life. He does not flinch. He grins. The age of spark has come, and it will not be turned away.